It's all about the combo this time as we find out which manifold or header is best for your camshaft. Find out this time on Engine Masters. Here's a test that comes straight out of the mind of my co-host Steve Dulcich, who has told me for years that the smaller your camshaft, the less your exhaust headers matter. Well, we're gonna find out if that's true, and this is one of those episodes that is a complete over-deliver because you're gonna see other stuff as well. You're gonna see the difference between a small camshaft and a big camshaft, and you're gonna see the power of a cast iron exhaust manifold versus a shorty tube header versus a long tube header. So much in this episode of Engine Masters. Let me tell you how we're gonna do it. First of all, we're gonna use our venerable 383 stroker small block Chevrolet. Let me tell you about the specs on that baby. It's a blueprint engine short block. It is just basically a stroked 350. It's got a 750 stroke crankshaft in it. This thing is almost 10-to-1 compression. The cylinder heads on it these days are from Airflow Research, the Enforcer line, which is their lower buck series, and we found these to be the best of the cheaper small block cylinder heads that you can buy. Up top, we've got a smaller intake manifold than we typically run. This time, it's got the Performer EPS, a low-rise intake manifold. We got a 1-inch spacer on it, and the carburetor is a 650 CFM Holley XP. Now, how about the specific manifolds and headers we're going to be testing? First up is going to be the Summit Racing cast iron exhaust manifold that is sort of like an OE Chevy ram's horn. The difference being, it does have the 2.5-inch outlet on it. Not all of the factory ones do. After that, we're gonna have a look at the Hedman tight tubes. These are block hugger headers, and they only have a 1 5/8-inch tube on them, and once again, a 2.5-inch outlet. Finally, the Dyno headers that we run all of the time, and we know that these actually make more power than a typical under-chassis header. These have a 1 3/4-inch tube diameter and a 3-inch collector. Now, how are we gonna execute this test? What we're gonna do is run each of these exhaust systems with 2 separate camshafts. The first one is a Comp Cam's hydraulic roller that's itty-bitty. It's from the line called the XR252HR. The duration at 50 thousandths tappet lift is, wait for it, 200 on the intake and 206 on the exhaust. That's really, really small. And then we're gonna step it up to the cam we're used to running in this engine, and it's wildly different. It's got 30 more degrees of duration on the intake. So it's 230 at 50 and 236 on the exhaust. That is a big swing in camshaft. So once again, you're gonna see those 2 power curves, and you're gonna see all of these manifolds. But first, I'm gonna go ask Steve Dulcich directly, what is his theory about why a small camshaft would not require as good of an exhaust header? All right, Dulcich, cams versus exhaust. Explain your theory.
My theory?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, exhaust is an important aspect of making power, and people tend to think of it as a matter of restriction. And restriction is definitely a part of it, but I think the more important aspect is the scavenging you get with a header compared to a manifold. And the scavenging is going to depend on overlap to have an effective time window to do its thing. So my theory is with the big cam, the headers help a lot more than they do with a small cam. So if you have a little small cam motor, the header benefit is not as great as a big cam motor. So what do you think?
What he means by scavenging is, of course, the wavelength tuning of the header that is removing exhaust and drawing air and fuel in during overlap, which means the intake and exhaust valve are open at the same time, that point in the camshaft. And with the smaller cam, there's less overlap than with the bigger cam. Does that summarize it?
Well, it clarified it.
Okay, perfect. So if your theory is true, I think what we should see here is that a change from manifolds to headers will have a greater percentage of gain on the big cam than with the small cam. Is that how we're judging this?
I would say so, and when you say from manifolds to headers, I think the long tubes are definitely going to have a lot more dramatic of an impact than the short tubes, because I think that the length of the short tube doesn't lend itself to the reflected wave reaching the cylinder head during overlap.
Makes sense. I mean, basically, I threw the shorty headers in because I just wanted to know if they make more power than cast iron manifolds.
Yeah, that's the interesting point. I mean, historically, shorties have not been great performers.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see if they're any better than this.
Yep, on 2 different camshafts. Right now, I guess it's just baseline with the cast iron, and actually what we're gonna do here, I think we should just run the cast iron manifold, the shorty header, and the long tube, and then we'll come back and tell everybody what happened.
Yeah, I think the advantage to that is we might have a bigger picture of what everything kind of does instead of trying to beat it up one piece at a time.
Okay,
All right.
give us a
Here we go.
baseline. And now the block hugger tubular headers.
We have the long tubes installed. Now it's going to come down to seeing how much power they make with the small cam in the engine.
Ta-da! Okay, Steve, first thing is, I don't know if we should get this thing a milk bone or take it for a walk. This is a pooch. This does not make power. The power numbers with the cast iron manifolds are 441.9 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM and a weak 347.9 horsepower at only 4,500 RPM. That is bad.
Yep.
Combination of bad cam, little itty bitty cam. I guess I shouldn't say it's bad.
No,
it's just
small.
tiny,
Yeah.
very tiny, 200 degrees of duration at 50 on the intake, and manifolds that I gotta hope are a restriction.
I would have to believe that there's somewhat of a restriction.
Yeah.
I hope.
That's really bad. My question though, and this is a big one, it's part of the reason I wanted to do this in the episode, is are the shorty block hugger tubular headers better than the cast iron manifolds? I really wanted the manifolds to work, but I don't think so. Let's see.
Oh.
This is more interesting than I thought. The black lines are with the manifolds and the red lines are with the shorty headers. So the little shorty headers actually were better everywhere power-wise. The peaks are 449 pound-feet of torque at 3,500 RPM, and the horsepower 357.4 at 4,800 RPM. We haven't seen this before with shorty headers.
No, not every time. I mean, I'm actually surprised that they actually perform pretty well. I've always kind of given them the nay, don't bother, but
Well,
this is decent.
It probably means that the manifolds are ungood. That would be my guess.
That might be too.
Yeah.
It's around 10 foot-pounds across the board. I'd say I'd average somewhere in there.
Except for right here, for some reason, they're really close, but
Yeah.
everywhere else, yeah. And I'm not gonna blanket say this is a test that applies every time, because there's different manifolds.
No, I was
that
going
could
to
be
say, I
different.
think you bring up a really good point. We don't know that absolutely that that's a great
We don't.
iron manifold.
And that manifold is aftermarket, but it does have the 2.5-inch collector, which is better than a factory one, which is usually 2 or 2 1/4. Yeah, so we don't really know, except we know these shorties are better than those manifolds.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably head for a shorty now, I mean, at this point.
But head for the long tube, because then we're all gonna go, oh yeah. Now we're looking at our long tube headers. To clarify, the red lines here are the long tube. The blue lines are going to be the shorty headers, and the black lines are the cast iron manifolds. The power peaks with our long tubes, 454.8 pound-feet of torque at 3,700 RPM and 366 horsepower at 4,800 RPM. And it's interesting that the long tubes are better at every point above 3,200, but look, they actually take a dive right there versus the shorty headers.
You know, I have to say, for as long as I've been doing this, I don't think I've ever done this test with this small of a cam. So these are kind of interesting results to me.
Again.
No, this is actually pretty good stuff, though. I mean, it still says that headers are worth something.
They are. Sure. The gains, to me, are kind of incremental. I mean, the manifolds, and then, boom, you go to the shorties. It picked up some, and then it picked up almost an equivalent amount going to the long tubes.
No, I think what I learned here is that, surprisingly, long tubes are better with a tiny camshaft, which means the Dulcich theory to hold up has to show an even bigger difference at each step with the bigger cam.
And do we look at that in power numbers or
percentages?
I'm going percentage.
I would say percentage. Like I said, you're showing incremental gains with all of those different things. I mean, would you get greater incremental gains with a big cam?
That's what we need to know.
How do we find out, Freiburger?
We're gonna go install a bigger cam, and then we're gonna run all 3 exhaust systems again and see what happens. We've tested 3 different headers and manifolds on this thing with a small cam. Now we're going to the big cam shaft. Once again, we're gonna run the manifold, the shorty header, and the long tube, and then sit down and discuss all of them at once.
All right, time for the shorty headers. Let's see what these do.
Okay, we got the shorties off, and we've got some real exhaust installed in it now. So we've got long tubes. We should get back to some sort of reasonable power level. This should be fun.
Now we've got data to share. With the cast iron manifolds in the big camshaft, the torque was 444.9 at 4,500 RPM, and the horsepower, 417.6 at 5,500 RPM. Hey, that is a massive difference between this and the small cam. You know, later on, I want to compare with long tubes, the small cam versus the big cam, just because we can. But right now, we're looking specifically at the exhaust. So let's overlay the shorty header and look at the difference there. big difference again. The power with the shorty header that's tubular was 458.1 pound-feet of torque at 4,600 and 437 horsepower at 5,600. I think our belief is that the manifold is restrictive, and that's why it's showing this big of a gain.
Yeah, I think so. And you could almost hear it. It sounded like a plugged muffler, you know, when it would get up into higher engine speeds. There just, I don't think, is enough flow there for that kind of power this engine makes.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant gain from manifolds to shorties. That makes me go, I'm not a manifold guy. Steve and I were talking about this off camera. We're like, how can the manifold be that bad? And I think it's because the way it's designed, you got 2 cylinders going in each tube.
Yeah.
And so one cylinder is blowing out and presenting a flow restriction to the second one, depending on where the firing order is. I'd have to look at that, but it's got to be why.
Yeah, it gets confusing. I mean, it's just kind of, it's so common. We see it in the boat manifolds, car manifolds. It's just something that you struggle with.
Yep. I like manifolds still because they're quiet, but hey, I'm old. Let's overlay the long tube header and see what kind of difference that made with the big camshaft. Interestingly, not as much of a change as it is between the manifold and the shorty.
I would have expected more there.
How weird. The peak power numbers with the long tube header in the big camshaft are 470.7 pound-feet of torque at 4,300 RPM, and the horsepower is 448.2 at 5,600. And I think we're at the point also where this intake manifold is restricting this camshaft.
I don't think there's any doubt. We've done combinations just identical to this with a Performer RPM air gap on it.
Yeah.
And the things are closer to 465 or so. This manifold is just designed for something different than a street Performer manifold. It's designed for lower engine speed.
You know what's really interesting that I noted with the small cam and our step through manifolds, shorties, and long tubes, the torque number didn't change that much.
As far as peak?
As far as the peak number, I mean, it went from 441 to 449 to 454, whereas with the big cam, it went from 444 to 458 to 470.
All the way to 470.
Wow. Yeah, so
That's
a much bigger change in the torque. But the thing that we must conclude out of all of this is that Steve's theory is correct.
Oh.
Yep. It makes a bigger difference to have headers on a larger cam than with a smaller cam. Here's the numbers. What we did is we took an average of the power range for each of these cams. And to be fair, it's a different power range for each camshaft. We went 2,800 to 5,500 with the small cam and 3,300 to 6,000 with the big cam. It's the same number of data points. But when you're looking at that average, with the small cam changing from the manifold to the shorty, we only saw a 1.9% change in torque and 2.1 on horsepower. But doing the exact same thing with the bigger cam, we saw an increase of 3.3 and 3.5%.
Yeah, it's a lot more.
Yeah. So it makes, your conclusion is right. It makes much bigger difference to have headers with a larger cam than with a smaller cam.
And when we're talking 1 or 1.5% difference, that doesn't sound like much, but it is. It's a lot in this type of curve overall.
And the other thing that's interesting, though, is when we change to the long tubes from the shorties, the difference between the two isn't as much of a percentage gain, which you can see here.
And you know, I have to say that this is as good of long tube as you're going to get.
Yeah.
You know, you do a chassis header or something, so that might even tighten up some with a chassis style header. I've been kind of not real fond of shorties forever, like don't bother, don't waste your time. But I mean, this is showing me a different kind of aspect of it, that maybe there's something there for guys who have ground clearance problems or that sort of thing.
There are applications for it for sure.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you want what the engine's capable of delivering, there's only one choice.
Yeah.
The long tube for me.
It is, but I would say the blue line here, the shorty header, that's not an undrivable engine.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It could be better with a long tube, but on a Jeep, I'm not wanting to negotiate past the front axle and dragging the ground on a lower car and all those other things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Huh, interesting. All right, just because we can, we got to show the difference between the small cam and the big cam with the long tubes. Oof. As you may have derived by now, the black lines are the big cam and the red lines are the small cam. And if you've got a tow truck, go ahead and get that tiny camshaft, but if you're anybody else, I would put the bigger cam in the thing.
You know, I think this illustrates really well why we had to use different RPM ranges. There's two completely different applications. You just can't compare the same RPM range with two cams that are so radically different.
Let's conclude. I think still the manifolds are a great, you know, tight-fitting application that's quiet. They don't break, they're cheap, they're easy.
They have their place.
But they suck. That's the problem. They don't make power. They also hold heat bad.
They do.
That's a big problem. As a matter of fact, when we change them on the dyno, we have to blow down the engine room for a long time just so we can handle that manifold.
Yeah.
And I guess my other conclusions are it's way easier to fit the shorty and the logging tubes make the most power. And the final conclusion is the wise and all-knowing engine masters was correct once again.
One more time.
Yep.
Yeah.
You need to give me more ideas so we can do more shows where you're right.
Dave comes up with enough that he's right, so it's
Yeah,
only fair.
it's your turn.
Okay.
More Dulcich science coming up on future episodes of Engine Masters.
And now, the shorty headers.
Wow.
Okay, Steve, first thing is, I don't know if we should get this thing a milk bone or take it for a walk.
You now have something better than Clifford.
We have another engine, Clifford the big red dog. This is a pooch. This does not make power. It's
Does
junk.
what it's supposed to below 3,000.
I guess so.
Your shadow moves like a velvet flame. I play the game, but I don't feel shame. Your eyes ignite a dangerous glow. Closer now, I lose control. Electric heat, it's pulling me in. Dancing on fire, let the night begin. Your touch is a spark, it's lighting my skin. Electric heat, we're lost in the spin. Like a secret dare, I'm tangled up in the thrill we share. The rhythm takes us, it's wild and free. No turning back, it's just you and me. Electric heat, it's pulling me in. Dancing on fire, let the night begin. Your touch is a spark, it's lighting my skin. Electric heat, we're lost in the spin. The fevered haze, we're burning bright in this wicked blaze. Your lips are closed, I can feel the sting. Caught in the rush of everything. Electric heat, it's pulling me in. Dancing on fire, let the night begin. Your touch is a spark, lighting my skin. Electric heat, we're lost in the spin.